What's going on, guys? We're showing up to the hardware store early, so we got some time to kill. And so I thought I'd do a video here and talk about the CSLB and contractor law in California and all that stuff. Okay? As you can see, it is very early. The sun is just coming up. Just coming up, baby. That's what we do. But pretty much over the last few years, especially in the ADU space, especially because of anchored tiny homes and stuff like that, contractor law has been a lot more focused on. And even somebody I follow in construction, or in construction, follow on Instagram, lobbied the state legislature on some bills and everything. It's going to be a lot harder to be a contractor in 10 years. That's what I'm going to tell you. Not for the guys who are already licensed and everything, but to become a new contractor, the bar is going to be raised. And I've said this before, especially personally to people, and I believe I've done a video on it before, but our insurance is about to go through the roof and our bonds are about to go through the roof, okay? People, here's the thing. It's a two-way street, and a lot of people are wondering why the CSLB is not really enforcing a lot of stuff, and why the bond requirements are so low, why the insurance requirements are so low, the minimums, and all that stuff. The consumers believe that they are really getting shafted, but there's a reason why they're getting shafted. Okay, we're going to explain this and everything like that. We're going to see if we can. We're going to see if we can here. But pretty much because of the anchored tiny homes especially and everything, it seems like some people with some money and some connections got fucked over, and they're going to make sure that they don't get fucked over ever again. And so they're going to the legislator and they're pushing for higher requirements for contractors, bonding, insurances, subcontractors having the workman's comp, pretty much having all your documents together, more ways, so you can't use illegal labor, you can't use unlicensed subcontractors, stuff like that. And the thing, what it's bringing up is that the CSLB and contractor law in California is very archaic, okay? This stuff has not changed since pretty much its inception. Unlicensed people just got the raise from $500 to $1,000. If you're unlicensed, you can't do construction work for hire unless it's $1,000 or under, including labor and materials, okay? So you cannot do any work over $1,000 now. It used to be, for decades, $500, okay? For me, contractors, we cannot take more than $1,000 deposit, like up front. This is what happens. This is what you do. You want to do that, the $1,000 you pay me, that is a deposit to get me on the schedule, okay? Or that is a deposit for a site visit and consultation, right? So that's what the $1,000 is for. And then once that $1,000 is paid out, pretty much we can do, full. The amount is essentially unlimited. There's a few factors, don't get me wrong, but essentially whatever I need, whatever the payment schedule was, I'm good to go from there. But that's how I make sure, because I can't start a job on $1,000, and you can comment or whatever all you want, saying, "Oh, I shouldn't need any money. You shouldn't need any money up front to start a job." Yeah, I guess, but I'm so busy and stuff right now. I'm not taking that risk. I'm not taking a risk of getting ripped off and not getting paid. Right? Like I said, it's a two-way street. So $1,000 just to come and get me scheduled and stuff like that. I know you're not screwing around. All right, and so that's what we do. That's the first deposit. So that needs to rise, because when clients are ready to go, boom, boom, move. Like, dude, they give me $1,000, and then the next day, if not hours later, boom, a way larger amount is then deposited to me. It's like a workaround, right? That doesn't need to be there. That needs to rise to 10 grand minimum. Okay. we need to be able, as residential contractors, because commercial guys could take 30% up front. And when you do commercial, you are way more free to take more money up front. And those guys start at 30% minimums, right? Deposits. So when you're in the commercial space, you're not dealing with this. But when you're in a residential space, you're dealing with this. And that's the thing. I don't mind, because I know what's going to happen, man. They're shooting for our insurances to go up so that we have to have more coverage, and they're shooting for our bonds to go up so that we have more bond coverage. And what that's going to do is cause us to, it's going to cost more money to be in business. And I'm okay with that. But I also need a little bit of leeway on the deposit side where I can get a $10,000 deposit up front. Because if it's going to cost me more to be in business, I need more revenue to stay in business. And so that means I need to be able to take higher deposits so I can keep revenue going faster and on time and make these bigger payments for these insurance policies and bond policies. Because I know people are going to want us to, right now the minimum's like 10 grand bond. It's nothing. People are going to want us to have $1 million in bond coverage. $1 million in bond coverage is going to be, at the low end, it would be $1,000 a year, and it wouldn't be a big deal. But I think it's going to be like 10 grand a year. You're going to need like 10 grand for your bond policy alone a year. And seeing that a bond right now is $600 for a year, that's a huge, huge increase on cost of business. And like I said, I'm okay with taking that hit. But I need to be able to take 10 grand up front. I need some leeway on that. And then also the other people are saying, oh, why is the CSLB not taking these complaints seriously? And unfortunately, this one is kind of on the consumer. I don't have any complaints on my license, never have. And the reason is the only people who have ever threatened to do that have been absolutely insane, have not paid me or anything. People use this as like a way, especially when this is all when I was starting out in business and just working with horrible clients. I'm very lucky now that I do not deal with this anymore. But it's always unrealistic, vindictive people who want you to do work for absolutely nothing and stuff. And what they do is they call, oh, if you don't do this or you don't come back, I'm going to call the CSLB and I'm going to complain on your license, yada, yada, yada. Like, my buddy, he had to lien a guy who didn't pay him for work, and the guy filed a complaint with the CSLB. And so then, my buddy called the CSLB, dealt with that, showed his side of the story. They could see that, it was frivolous. But look, the only times I've ever dealt with it is when somebody is being fraudulent and vindictive and untruthful about what is happening in the situation. And so the CSLB, 9 out of 10 times, it is a frivolous complaint such as that. And so what happens is they had a system of you had to have 10 complaints or more for them to even take it seriously and start looking into you. Okay? Because, again, I unfortunately, this one is somewhat on the consumer abusing their power on the CSLB side over the decades, and CSLB essentially getting fed up with it and not wanting to deal with that stuff anymore. And also, they don't have enough people in the CSLB. Who wants to go work for the CSLB? Be serious. Who wants to go work for the CSLB? There's not people lining up in front of the CSLB to take these positions. And so they're understaffed. They can only take on complaints and stuff that are very, very serious. And so that is one thing too that the consumer kind of has to dial back on, because the people who are really in trouble couldn't get help, and the CSLB allowed something like Anchor Tiny Homes to happen because of the amount of fraudulent and frivolous complaints to the CSLB. And so the CSLB does need a reworking. Everything in contracting in California needs a modern upgrade. Unfortunately, the laws need to be updated, the numbers need to be updated, and the CSLB needs to be updated to keep everybody. Again, dude, I used to be a cowboy, man, especially when I was young, and like, oh, fuck this shit, let's get out. And again, you could accuse me of kind of kicking down the ladder on being this guy. I really don't mind if there was more regulation or anything like that, or like more oversight on this stuff. But again, I want to give and take here because we are really archaic in the numbers. And like we need to up the minimum deposits. We need to do all that stuff if we're gonna start getting required more responsibility. And this stuff is gonna come into modern times. So that is all I'm saying. That is kind of why the CSLB is failing. That's why it just everything is very archaic. And so we are going to be in a time of change. And that's also going to, I believe, slow the amount of people coming into the trades, or at least opening new businesses in the trades, in my opinion. So we'll see how that goes and everything like that. But unfortunately, as I've preached before, that's kind of needed because so many people are looking at the money in the trades and they're rushing into it to try to capture that money. And it's leaving a lot of people ripped off. It's leaving a lot of mistakes. It's leaving a lot of people doing stuff that they don't know what they're doing. And so that kind of does need to be curbed. But anyways, let's go get our stuff and let's get to work, baby.